Lightning forked across the sky, a brilliant, terrifying crack that illuminated my bedroom for a split second. The ensuing boom of thunder was so violent it seemed to shake the very foundations of the world. Or perhaps it was just the frantic beating of my own heart. My eyes flew open, staring not at the sterile white ceiling of a hospital but at the familiar, slightly faded floral pattern of my own bedroom. Rain hammered against the window pane in a relentless, deafening roar. I was drenched in a cold sweat, my pulse a wild drum against my ribs. This was wrong. This was all wrong. The last thing I remembered was the feel of cold mud, the dizzying plunge, and the sound of a man's voice screaming my name. Lena. Lena. Filled with a regret that came far too late. Yet here I was. Alive. In my own bed. On the worst day of my life. The memories of my previous life, my first life, crashed over me like a tidal wave. July 15, 1975. The third year of my marriage to Marcus Thorne. And the day the carefully constructed illusion of my happiness began to unravel. On this exact day, Marcus's childhood sweetheart Clara Bell was due to return to the army compound. She was one of the educated youth finally coming back from the countryside. That woman, with a face like a porcelain doll and a will of pure iron, would need only to whisper, "Marcus, I'm back," to effortlessly reclaim the man who was supposed to be my husband. And I, Lena Thorne, once hailed as the ideal military wife, had been foolish enough to help them. I'd washed the clothes Clara dirtied with my own hands. I'd personally encouraged her to visit our home more often. And even after I'd discovered their whispered conversations and lingering glances, I'd questioned whether I had simply not done enough. It wasn't until 3 years later, on another stormy night, that I found Marcus and Clara wrapped in each other's arms in the duty room of the military hospital. That was when my heart finally broke for good. That night I had run blindly into the rain, slipping on a muddy mountain path. I'd plunged off a cliff. In my final moments I'd heard Marcus's desperate scream. "Lena. Lena." His voice was filled with a fake, useless grief. The bedroom door creaked open, pulling me from the nightmarish memory. Marcus walked in, dressed in his crisp officer's uniform. At 26 he was in the prime of his life, his handsome face a mask of concern. Confidence and ambition glowed in his eyes, etched into the sharp lines of his jaw. He had the air of a man destined for greatness, a young captain on the fast track. I bolted upright in bed, the sheets tangling around me. A flood of memories of a life already lived surged through my mind. "What's wrong? You don't look well," Marcus said, his voice laced with a warmth I now knew was superficial. He reached out to touch my forehead to check if the fever from last night still held me in its grip. I instinctively flinched away, avoiding his hand. In my past life, that small act of concern would have moved me to tears. I would have grasped his hand, brought it to my cheek and whispered, "Marcus, you're so good to me." But now all I felt was a deep, primal revulsion. "I'm fine," I said, my voice calm and completely void of the soft, sugary tone he was used to. Marcus froze, his hand still suspended in the air. The wife in his memory was gentle, always speaking like a little girl gently whining. This cold, detached voice was a foreign language. "Lena," a voice called from outside. It was Private Davies, the guard. "There's a call from command, sir. Says it's urgent." Marcus frowned slightly, glanced back at me with a confused expression and said, "I'll go answer it. You should rest a bit more. Tell me what you'd like to eat tonight. I'll have the mess hall make it for you." I didn't respond. I just looked at him in silence, seeing him for the first time not as my husband, but as the architect of my misery. Only after he left did I let out a long, shuddering breath. This was a second chance. A miracle I had never dared to pray for. Given this new life, I would never again be the foolish woman who gave up everything for a man. This time I would live for myself. Thunder rolled again outside, like battle drums echoing my newfound resolve. I got out of bed and walked to the vanity. The mirror reflected a pale but still beautiful face. At 23 my skin was fair, my features soft and gentle, the very picture of a classic beauty. What a pity that in my past life, I had wasted this beauty on a man who didn't deserve it. I opened a drawer and took out a photo album, flipping directly to the picture placed right in the center. In it, an 18-year-old Clara Bell was smiling radiantly. She wore a simple plaid shirt, her hands tucked behind her back, standing beneath a large oak tree. On the back, in her neat, elegant handwriting, were the words, "To my dearest Marcus, with all my love. Clara, Spring 1970." It was a photo Marcus had never been willing to throw away. In my past life when I discovered it I had not gotten angry. I'd even said, first loves are always sweet memories. I understand. I had been a fool beyond saving. Now with a steady hand I tore the photo into tiny pieces and tossed the scraps into the trash bin. The sound of ripping paper was immensely satisfying. After doing that I suddenly felt refreshed as though a great weight had been lifted from my chest. Footsteps echoed from the stairway. Marcus was coming back. "Lena," he said as he stepped into the room. "Command just notified us. A group of educated youth are returning to the city. They'll arrive tomorrow and our unit is in charge of receiving them." He sat on the edge of the bed, his tone carrying a trace of excitement he couldn't quite hide. "Can you guess who might be coming back?" Of course I knew. In my past life I had naively asked, "Is it that classmate of yours, Clara Bell? You've mentioned her quite a few times, haven't you?" Looking back now, I realized the light in Marcus's eyes back then wasn't the glow of friendship. It was the fervor of love rediscovered. "I don't know," I said coolly. "Who do you think it is?" Marcus was clearly caught off guard. By all logic he should have acted indifferent, but I could see the expectation he couldn't quite hide in his eyes. "Maybe Clara Bell," he finally said. "She's been in the countryside for 3 years. It's about time she came back." "Oh," I responded lightly and didn't say another word. Marcus waited a moment. When he saw I had no other reaction, confusion flickered across his face. "Aren't you curious? Claire's my classmate. He's really nice. I think you two would get along well." In my past life that would have immediately excited me. I would have asked question after question and even said I'd prepare a big welcome dinner for her. But this time I simply said, "I'm not curious. Your classmate has nothing to do with me." Marcus froze at that. He suddenly realized something was off about me today, but he couldn't quite put his finger on what. "Lena, what's wrong today? Did I do something wrong?" I looked at the confusion written all over his face, and a wave of bitter irony surged in my chest. In my past life, how desperately I'd wanted to hear those words. I had longed for Marcus to care about how I felt, to ask me if something was wrong. But back then he had eyes only for Clara Bell. He'd barely remembered he had a wife at all. Now he was finally asking, but I no longer cared. "No," I said calmly. "I just think your matters are yours to decide. You don't need to discuss everything with me." Marcus frowned. On the surface what I said sounded normal, but something about it felt deeply wrong. I used to love being involved in his work, asking about his meetings, his day. I'd said it made me feel part of his life. Now I was telling him not to consult me. "Marcus, I'm tired. I want to sleep a little more," I said, lying back down and turning away from him. He sat at the edge of the bed for a long time, staring at my back, a growing, nameless unease taking root in his heart. He felt it then, a fundamental shift that had quietly occurred. The world had changed overnight and he was only just beginning to notice. The next morning, news had already spread through the military compound like wildfire. Clara Bell was back. I was in the backyard, hanging laundry on the line, the damp sheets snapping in the brisk morning air, when I overheard Mrs. Gable from next door chatting with another officer's wife. "Oh my, that Clara looks even prettier now," Mrs. Gable chirped. 3 years in the countryside didn't ruin her at all. Her skin's still so fair and she's just as lovely as ever. "I know, right?" the other woman agreed. "I saw her talking to Captain Thorne earlier. The two of them look like they were made for each other. Honestly, if her family hadn't gotten into all that trouble back then and she hadn't been sent away, she'd probably be the captain's wife right now." "Shoo, quiet," Mrs. Gable hushed her, though her voice held no real reproach. "Don't let Lena hear you. But, Lena really is a good girl. She's every bit the model military wife. It's just, she's a little too soft." I listened to their gossip, my hands mechanically pinning a shirt to the line. In my past life, hearing that kind of talk had felt like a knife twisting in my heart. I had wanted to crawl into a hole and disappear, feeling like the whole world was mocking me for stealing someone else's place, for not being good enough for Marcus Thorne. Now I felt nothing. I understood these people weren't judging me. They were simply enjoying the drama, the ripple of excitement Clara's return brought to their monotonous lives. "Lena." Marcus's voice came from the front gate. I turned my head and saw him standing there, and beside him was the woman who had haunted my previous life. It had been 3 years since I'd last seen Clara Bell, and she had indeed become more beautiful. Time had left no trace on her face. Instead, It had added a layer of graceful maturity. She wore a faded blue mouse-style jacket, her hair braided into two neat plaits. Simple as her appearance was, it couldn't hide the innate elegance she possessed. The worst part was the way she looked at Marcus. Her gaze was so soft, it was almost dripping with a honeyed sweetness. "Lena, let me introduce you," Marcus said, a warm, genuine smile on his face that he rarely bestowed upon me. "This is my classmate I told you about, Clara Bell. Clara, this is my wife, Lena Thorne." Clara stepped forward, a gentle, practiced smile on her lips. "Hi, Lena. I'm Clara. Marcus always talks about you. He says you're the best military wife in the whole compound." In my past life, those words would have moved me to tears of gratitude. I would have taken her hand and said, "You're too kind. We're family now. No need to be so formal." But this time I simply nodded and said, "Hello." Just one word, distant and polite with no trace of warmth or enthusiasm. Clara clearly froze for a second. She had expected a warm, welcoming, perhaps even gullible woman. Not this ice queen. Marcus noticed the awkward tension and quickly tried to smooth things over. "Lena's just recovering from a fever. She's still a bit weak. Don't take it personally, Clara." "Of course not," Clara replied graciously, though a flicker of confusion passed through her eyes. "Health comes first. Clara's staying at the guest house right now," Marcus continued, turning back to me. "Conditions over there aren't great. I was thinking maybe she could stay here for a few days, just until her work assignment is finalized. What do you think?" There was the question that had begun my downfall. In my past life, I had agreed without a moment's hesitation. I'd even offered her our master bedroom while Marcus and I moved to the smaller guest room. Looking back, I had practically handed her the knife she would use to stab me in the back. "That isn't appropriate," I said flatly. Marcus's smile vanished. "What?" "Men and women have boundaries," I stated, my voice level. "People might talk. It wouldn't look good for a captain." His expression changed instantly. "Lena, Clara's my classmate. We've known each other since we were children. Does that mean classmates can't help each other? Does that mean classmates can live together?" I cut him off, my voice calm but firm. "Captain Thorne, you're a soldier. You should be even more mindful of appearances." I called him Captain Thorne, not the usual endearment of Marcus. My tone was businesslike, official, as if I were handling a formal matter of protocol. Clara jumped in quickly, her voice soft and pitiful. "Lena's right. I wasn't thinking it through. The guest house might be a bit rough, but I can manage. I don't want to cause Marcus any trouble." She played the victim perfectly, making me sound like a cruel, unreasonable wife. Marcus looked at her, then back at me. I could see the displeasure growing in his eyes. The Lena Thorne he knew had been the kindest person he knew. She'd bring home stray cats. And now she was treating an old classmate with this kind of coldness. "Marcus, I have things to do," I said calmly, collecting the empty laundry basket. "I'll leave you two to talk." At the doorway, I suddenly stopped and turned to face Clara. "Miss Bell," I said, my voice clear and carrying. "Even if you're Marcus's classmate, I still need to remind you. He's a married man. Please be mindful of your behavior." Without waiting for a response, I turned and walked into the house, leaving the two of them standing on the path, utterly speechless. I didn't need to look back to know that Clara's face would be flushed bright red, tears welling in her eyes as she stammered out some excuse to Marcus. I walked to the window and peered through the curtain. Just as I expected, Marcus was gently patting Clara's shoulder, whispering something to her. Clara leaned into him, looking delicate and pitiful, the perfect image to tug at a man's heartstrings. I had seen this exact scene in my past life. Back then, it had felt like a knife to my heart. I had wanted to rush out and confront them, to scream and cry. But now I felt nothing. Only a cold, calm detachment. In fact, I even felt a twinge of satisfaction. In my past life, I had made things too easy for them. In this life, I'd make sure they learned how it felt to fight for every inch. If Clara wanted to relive her old romance and Marcus was ready to fall in love with someone else, then so be it. Let them chase their so-called true love. One thing was certain. I, Lena Thorne, would never again be anyone's stepping stone. That evening, Marcus came home, his expression dark and stormy. The cheerful facade he reserved for Clara was gone, replaced by a grim seriousness. "Lena, we need to talk," he said, sitting down heavily on the sofa. He didn't even take off his jacket. I was reading a book and didn't even look up. "What's there to talk about? Your attitude towards Clara today was out of line," he said directly, his voice tight. She's my classmate and our guest. How could you treat her like that? You humiliated her in front of everyone. I finally raised my head and looked at him, my expression neutral. And how exactly did I treat her? You know, the guest house she's staying in is in poor condition, but you refused to let her stay here. And then in front of everyone you said those things to her. Do you know how that must have made her feel? What did I say? I asked, genuinely curious to hear his reasoning. You told her to be mindful of her behavior. Marcus's voice rose several notches. She's a young woman just returned from the countryside without anyone to rely on. And yet you question her morals. I put the book down and looked at him quietly. Was I wrong? You're a man. She's a woman. Living together under one roof. Don't you think that deserves some boundaries? We're classmates. Just classmates. Nothing more. Oh right. Purely a classmate relationship, I said flatly, returning to my book. My indifference only fanned the flames of his anger. Lena, what's wrong with you lately? You're not acting like yourself. Not acting like myself? I finally looked him in the eye, my gaze steady and unreadable. And what was I like before? That shut him up. The Lena he remembered had been kind and gentle, always thoughtful and patient. She'd put his needs above everything else, looked at him with adoration, and followed his every word without question. But now he couldn't bring himself to say it. To say it out loud would be to acknowledge the gulf that had opened between us. You used to be very kind, he finally said, the word sounding weak and inadequate. Kind. I let out a short, humorless laugh that made his heart go cold. So, you think I'm not kind anymore? You seem so cold now. Being cold is better than being stupid, I said, standing up. Marcus, we've been married for 3 years. I think I've earned the right to remind you of something. You're a soldier. You have a wife. You should know what's appropriate and what's not. With that, I turned and walked toward the bedroom. Lena, he called after me, frustration evident in his voice. You've changed. You're completely different now. I paused at the doorway but didn't look back. People change, Captain Thorne. Inside the bedroom, I sat down at the vanity and looked at myself in the mirror. Marcus said I'd changed. And he was right. I had changed. I was no longer the foolish girl I used to be. No longer blind. No longer willing to sacrifice my dignity for a man who didn't deserve it. Was that really so wrong? From the hallway came the sound of the front door slamming shut with enough force to rattle the pictures on the wall. Marcus had stormed out. I knew exactly where he was going. He was going to Clara. That's what he always did in my past life. Every time we argued, he'd run to her, pouring out his troubles while Clara would comfort him softly, saying, Lena must just be under too much pressure, Marcus. You need to be more understanding. How perfect. Such a saintly, gentle, understanding woman. But this time I wasn't going to give them the chance to paint me as the hysterical wife. If Marcus was so obsessed with his pure friendship, then I'd make sure everyone in the entire compound saw just how pure it really was. Early the next morning, I left the house and walked straight to the military district headquarters. I was going to see Mrs. Vance, the general's wife. Mrs. Vance was the most respected woman in the entire compound. As the commander's wife, her word was law. More importantly, she was a strict, traditional woman. Nothing offended her more than a breach in moral conduct. Lena, what brings you here? Mrs. Vance looked surprised but welcoming when she saw me. Auntie Vance, I said, getting straight to the point. I wanted to talk to you about something. What is it? She asked, gesturing for me to sit on the sofa. Come, have a seat and tell me. I sat down, organizing my thoughts before I spoke. It's about one of Marcus's classmates. You mean that girl Clara Bell? Auntie Vance clearly had already heard the gossip. I heard she's quite the pretty one. Yes, I nodded. She just returned to the city yesterday and Marcus wanted her to stay at our house. I thought it was inappropriate and said no. I let a touch of wounded innocence seep into my tone. Auntie Vance's expression darkened instantly. Letting her stay with you? That's completely improper. But Marcus said I was being petty, I added, looking down at my hands. He said I wasn't being kind. Auntie Vance, do you think I was wrong? Of course not. She shot up from her seat, outraged. A man and a woman living under the same roof like that? What kind of message does that send? Marcus must have lost his mind. That's what I thought too, I said, my voice soft. But Marcus said she's just a classmate and I shouldn't overthink it. A classmate? And that's supposed to make it okay? Her voice rose. What? Classmates are exempt from common decency now? And this Clara, she's unmarried, right? How could she even suggest staying in the home of a married man? It shows a complete lack of character. I didn't say anything more. I simply wiped a non-existent tear from the corner of my eye. Don't you worry, child, Auntie Vance said, her voice softening as she patted my hand. Leave this to me. I'll talk to the general myself. These young officers need some discipline. Conduct issues are not a trivial matter. Thank you, Auntie Vance, I said sincerely. After leaving the headquarters, I paid several more strategic visits. I went to see the wife of the director of the military hospital, the wife of the logistics chief, and even the elderly lady from the political commissar's family. At each stop, I casually brought up Clara's situation, mentioning how confused and hurt I felt by Marcus's insistence. None of the women reacted kindly. To them, Clara was clearly a woman who didn't understand boundaries, and Marcus was a man completely disregarding his wife's feelings. The gossip spread faster than I could have imagined. By late afternoon, the entire military compound was buzzing with it. With every retelling, the story grew more outrageous. Some said Clara had come back just to seduce a married man. Others said Marcus was planning to leave me. Still others whispered that I was already preparing to file for divorce. I was hanging the last of the laundry when Private Davies came rushing over, his face pale. Captain, the commander wants to see you. Right away, sir. I didn't look up, but a small, cold smile touched my lips. The first strike had landed. When Marcus heard the rumors later that day, he was completely stunned. He had never imagined things would spiral this far out of control. All he'd wanted was for Clara to stay a few days in a comfortable place. How had it turned into a full-blown scandal that had reached the commander's ears? He returned from headquarters hours later, his face ashen. He walked into the house, his uniform jacket unbuttoned, and looked at me as if seeing me for the first time. I was in the kitchen calmly making dinner. You went to see Mrs. Vance and the others, didn't you? He asked bluntly, his voice hollow. I peeked my head out from the kitchen. What? I replied, pretending not to understand. Don't play dumb, Lena, he snapped, the frustration finally boiling over. Who else could have told them all about this? The commander just reamed me out for a solid hour. Who else but you? I set the spatula down and turned to face him, leaning against the door frame. What are you trying to say, Marcus? Are you accusing me of something? I just want to know why you had to stir things up like this, he demanded, running a hand through his hair. Why did you have to go and tell everyone? What exactly did I do? I shot back, my voice cool. I paid visits to a few elders and mentioned a few things I was struggling with as a wife. What's so wrong about that? Since when is seeking advice from senior military wives a crime? You knew how they would react, he said, his jaw tight. You knew exactly what would happen. I can't control what people think, Marcus, I answered. If there's really nothing going on, why should it matter what others think? Or does it matter because there is some truth to it? Marcus was at a loss for words. He knew I was right. If there really was nothing inappropriate between him and Clara, the gossip shouldn't bother him. But the problem was, even he wasn't entirely sure what his feelings for her were. Her return had stirred up old emotions he'd thought long buried. Now even the commander knows about this, he finally said, his voice dropping to a defeated growl. You happy now? Why would that make me happy? I looked at him, genuinely perplexed. Is it a bad thing for your superior to take an interest in your life? You do work under him, don't you? I would think he'd want to know if one of his captains was causing a scandal that could reflect poorly on the entire unit. You know that's not what I mean. Then what do you mean? I pressed him, my eyes narrowing. Are you saying I shouldn't defend my marriage? That I should just sit back and let people talk behind my back while I pretend everything's fine? Is that the kind Lena you want me to be? The one who smiles while her husband brings his lover into their home? Marcus couldn't argue. He wasn't used to this version of me. Confident, composed, ruthlessly logical. The old Lena never questioned him, never argued. She accepted everything silently. But this new Lena, every word cut through his excuses like a sharp blade. I'll get your dinner, I said, turning my back on him and returning to the stove. The conversation was over. I had won this round. Oh, and I forgot to tell you, I added over my shoulder, my voice casual. Clara's been assigned to a position at the County Cultural Bureau. She's reporting there tomorrow. Marcus froze. Since when? This afternoon, I replied, carrying the dishes to the table. I heard the order came straight from headquarters. It hit him then. This too was my doing. Not only had I blown the situation wide open, but I'd used the momentum to push for her reassignment. She was being removed from the compound, from his daily life, permanently. He stared at me as I sat down and began to eat as if nothing had happened. This woman, he thought, a chill running down his spine, has become terrifying. You happy now? He growled, gritting his teeth. I don't know what you're talking about, I said evenly between bites. Work assignments are handled by the organization. What do they have to do with me? Marcus stared at my comm profile, and for the first time he felt a strange kind of fear. He realized he had never truly understood the woman he married. The next day Clara left. I stood by the upstairs window watching the scene below. Marcus was seeing her off. Clara had tears in her eyes, looking fragile and beautiful. Marcus's expression was complicated, a mix of guilt, longing, and frustration. They stood there talking for a long time. Finally, Clara stood on her toes and kissed him lightly on the cheek. It was a bold move and plenty of people saw it. The gossip, which had begun to die down, ignited anew with twice the ferocity. I just watched with a cold smile. In my past life that scene would have torn me apart. Now all I felt was disgust. Their little performance was painfully cheap and predictable. When Marcus came home, his face was dark and stormy. He looked straight up at the window where I stood. Did you enjoy the show? He asked, his voice dripping with bitterness. I didn't flinch. I looked right back at him, calm and collected. Not bad. Quite the spectacle. He stormed upstairs, bursting through the bedroom door. Lena, why are you doing this? Doing what? Don't play dumb. You're the one who got Clara transferred, aren't you? I looked up from my book. Marcus, I think you've misunderstood something. I'm just a military wife. I don't have the authority to reassign personnel. But you can influence the wives of the officers, he shot back. I closed my book and looked at him with utter composure. I simply told the truth. If that's what you call scheming, then sure, I schemed. Marcus hadn't expected me to admit it so directly. It caught him off guard, leaving him speechless. Why are you doing this to Clara? He finally asked, his voice strained. She didn't do anything wrong. She didn't do anything wrong? I walked up to him until we were almost toe-to-toe, my eyes locked on his. An unmarried woman asks to live in a married couple's home, and that's not wrong? She just didn't have anywhere else to go. There are dozens of empty rooms in this compound. Why did it have to be our home? I countered. Marcus tried to defend her, but no reasonable argument came to mind. And what about that little scene downstairs just now? I continued, closing in on him. A woman kisses a married man on the cheek in front of everyone. That's okay too. It was just a goodbye, he said defensively. A goodbye kiss between old friends. I let out a cold, sharp laugh. Do you think I'm a fool, Marcus? He was stunned into silence by the look in my eyes. There was no softness, no admiration left in them. Only a cold, hard indifference and a flicker of contempt. It was like I had become a complete stranger to him. A stranger he no longer recognized and for the first time truly feared. I'll admit it, he said after a long moment, gritting his teeth as if the words were being physically torn from him. I do have feelings for Clara. But that's in the past. It's a memory. I'm your husband now. Oh. I gave a single flat, dismissive response. Then I turned and walked out of the room. Where are you going? He called out, chasing after me into the hallway. Divorce, I said without turning back. The word hung in the air, cold and final. What? Marcus gasped, grabbing my arm in a panic. Lena, you can't mean that. You can't. Why not? I shook off his hand. You just admitted you have feelings for another woman. What am I supposed to do? Wait around for you to cheat on me? For the gossip to become reality? I haven't done anything with her, he said quickly, desperately. I haven't betrayed you. Maybe not yet, I replied with icy calm. But if that day comes, what then? Marcus, if your heart already belongs to someone else, there's no reason for this marriage to continue. No, I don't agree to a divorce, he said, his voice rising in desperation. We're married, Lena. You can't just walk away over a suspicion. Then make a vow, I said, stopping mid-step and turning to face him. My voice was quiet but absolute. Swear to me. Swear that from this day forward, you will never see Clara Bell again. Never contact her again. Never speak her name. Swear it. Marcus opened his mouth. But no words came out. Cutting off all contact with Clara? Could he really do it? His silence was more eloquent than any speech. You can't, can you? I said softly, the truth of it settling between us like a death sentence. Then divorce is the only option left. Lena, please just listen to me. I don't want to listen. I cut him off sharply. Marcus, I already gave you a chance. You chose Clara. Now I'm choosing myself. I didn't choose her. Then swear it. I shot back, my voice turning cold and hard. Swear that you'll never see her again. Never speak to her again. Swear it on your honor as an officer. Again Marcus fell silent. He couldn't do it. Even though Clara had been reassigned, he knew in his heart he'd go looking for her. He couldn't control the pull she had on him, the ghost of the past that was so much more appealing than the complicated reality of his present. If you can't even do that, I said, my voice dripping with a finality that chilled him to the bone, then don't bother saying any more empty words. I turned and started down the stairs. I'm going to the political office, I said. I'm going to file for divorce. No. Marcus lunged after me, cutting me off at the bottom of the stairwell. Lena, I won't let you do this. That's your problem, I said calmly, looking him directly in the eyes, unafraid. But my decision is clear. Marcus looked at me, utterly baffled. The world he knew was crumbling around him and he couldn't understand why I was the one wielding the wrecking ball. Why? He pleaded, his voice cracking. Why does it have to come to this? We can move past this. I promise I won't bring up Clara again. We can forget this ever happened. Because I don't love you anymore, I said, cutting straight to the heart of it. The words hit him like a physical blow, a thunderclap that shook him to his core. He staggered back a step. What did you say? He asked, as if he hadn't heard me correctly, as if the words were too impossible to comprehend. I said I don't love you anymore, I repeated, my voice steady and unwavering. There was no anger in it, no hysterics. Just a simple, devastating statement of fact. Lena, that's impossible, he said, his face pale with shock. You've loved me for years. You can't just stop loving someone. It doesn't work like that. Why not? I asked, my head tilted. Love fades, Marcus. Just like it appears. It's not a permanent state. It needs to be nurtured, respected, valued. You stopped nurturing it. You stopped valuing it. So it died. It's that simple. I don't believe you, he said, grabbing my shoulders, his grip tight. You're just angry. You're hurt. You don't mean that. Once you calm down, you'll think differently. You'll remember what we had. I looked at the face so close to mine, the face I had once loved so desperately I would have died for it. And I felt nothing. Not a flicker of emotion. Not anger, not sadness, not love. In my past life, I used to dream of hearing him say he couldn't lose me. Now that he was finally saying it, I found I no longer cared. Let go of me, Marcus, I said softly, but with an iron will that made his fingers loosen instinctively. No, I won't let go, he said, but his grip was weaker now, his eyes pleading. You're my wife. I won't let you leave me. Then you can keep trying to hold on to a ghost, I said, freeing myself from his grip completely. But I'm telling you right now, no matter how much you resist, I'll find a way to make this divorce happen. I will walk out of this marriage, with or without your permission. With that, I turned and walked out the door. Behind me, I heard Marcus's voice rise into a furious, desperate shout. Lena, get back here. I didn't turn around. Not in this life. The walk to the political commissar's office was long, but I felt lighter with every step. I was taking control. I was ending it. Commissar Briggs was silent for a long while after I finished speaking. He was a kind man in his 50s with a serious face that had seen too much drama in army families. Lena, he finally said, steepling his fingers. Divorce isn't something to be taken lightly. Are you two just going through a rough patch? These things happen in marriages. Perhaps you should take some time, talk things through before making such a permanent decision. Commissar, I said firmly, meeting his gaze. I've made up my mind. The respect in this marriage is gone. The trust is broken. I have to leave. But why? He pressed gently. I know Marcus well. He's a capable officer, dependable. A good man. You've been married 3 years. You've always looked like a happy couple from the outside. Why the sudden change? I had prepared for this. Commissar, I've realized we're fundamentally incompatible. And he has feelings for another woman. I can't live with that. Briggs frowned deeply. You're talking about that girl Clara Bell. Yes, I nodded. Marcus admitted to having feelings for her. His expression immediately turned grave. As a political commissar, he had zero tolerance for misconduct, especially when it involved an officer's personal integrity and the stability of a military family. He admitted that to you directly? He asked, his voice hard. Absolutely, I said, allowing my eyes to well up with unshed tears. It wasn't hard. I was crying for the woman I used to be. I'm a woman, Commissar. I can't share my husband with anyone else. I won't. Of course you can't, Briggs said, slamming his hand on the desk. Marcus has lost his mind. I'll have his bars for this. That's why I want a divorce, I continued, my voice trembling just enough to be convincing. I don't want to destroy his career, but I won't sacrifice my own happiness and self-respect. I just want to leave quietly. Briggs looked at me, this young woman sitting across from him, and felt a pang of sympathy. I had always been known in the compound as the model military wife. Diligent, beautiful, never once complaining. And now here I was, my heart broken, requesting a divorce because my husband's heart had shifted elsewhere. Lena, go home for now, he finally said, his voice heavy. I need to look into this. I'll be speaking with Captain Thorne. Thank you, Commissar. After leaving his office, I didn't go home. I went straight to headquarters. I needed to speak with Commander Vance himself. Lena. Commander Vance looked surprised to see me in his office. What brings you here? Is everything all right? Commander, I said, getting straight to the point. I'm here to request to be discharged from my military spouse status. Discharged? He asked, his brow furrowing. Why? I want a divorce, I stated plainly. Once the divorce is finalized, I won't be a military wife anymore. There's no reason for me to remain in the compound or on the roster. Vance was momentarily stunned. Divorce? You and Marcus? Good God, woman, why? His heart is with someone else, I said, keeping my voice steady. I don't want to force things. It's better for everyone if I just step aside. Nonsense. Vance burst out, his face turning red with anger. That bastard Marcus. I warned him already after that foolishness about that Bell girl staying with you. I told him to watch his step. Please don't blame him too harshly, Commander, I said, putting on a mask of calm generosity. Feelings can't be forced. Since he loves someone else, I'd rather step aside than make everyone suffer. I just want to start a new life. No, I can't allow a good woman like you to be wronged like this, Vance said furiously. Thank you, Commander, I replied sincerely. But truly my mind is made up. I just want to leave quietly. Vance looked at my determined expression. He saw the strength there, not just the hurt. He felt both admiration and sorrow. What a good woman, he muttered. And he didn't know how to treasure her. Blind fool. News of the impending divorce spread through the compound like a prairie fire. The buzz was incessant. Everyone sympathized with me, and outrage at Marcus's heartlessness and disloyalty grew by the hour. Marcus was summoned to headquarters again. This time Vance was genuinely furious. Marcus Thorne, you've truly disappointed me, he roared the moment Marcus walked in and saluted. You had a pearl beyond price for a wife, and you threw her away for a memory. Has your brain been kicked by a mule? Sir, I can explain, Marcus began. Save it. Vance snapped. The entire compound knows you've fallen for another woman and driven your wife to divorce. How am I supposed to explain this to the other officers and their wives? How does this look for the unit? Marcus stood with his head down, unable to say a single word in his defense. The truth was a prison he had built for himself. I'll ask you one last time, Vance said, his voice low and dangerous. Do you want to keep your family, your career, and your reputation or not? Yes, sir, Marcus answered without hesitation. Then get your act together. Vance shouted. Forget about Clara Bell completely. Cut all ties. And you go apologize to Lena. Crawl on your knees if you have to. You don't deserve her, but she's still your wife. Don't screw this up again. When Marcus left headquarters, his face was as pale as paper. He finally understood the magnitude of what he had done. He had truly enraged everyone. If Lena really filed for divorce, his future in the military would be over. His reputation would be in tatters. But could he really forget about Clara? That beautiful, gentle woman, that perfect, youthful first love? Could he truly just let her go? When he returned home, I was packing a suitcase. What are you doing? He asked, his voice hollow. Packing, I said without looking up from folding a blouse. I'm moving out tomorrow. I found a small place in town. No, the word was a strangled gasp. He rushed forward and grabbed my hand. Lena, you can't go. Please. Why not? I pulled my hand away, the contact feeling alien and unpleasant. There has to be something left between us, he said, panic rising in his eyes. There is, I said, and for a second hope flickered in his face. There are 3 years of memories. Most of them are of me waiting for you, of me loving you, of me being alone while you were emotionally elsewhere. Those are the things between us, Marcus. And I'm tired of carrying them. I was wrong, he pleaded, his voice desperate. I truly realize it now. I swear I won't bring up Clara, again. I swear. It's too late, I said, placing the folded blouse in the suitcase. I don't love you anymore. That's not something you can fix with an apology. That's not true, he refused to believe it, his voice breaking. You've loved me for so many years. You can't just stop. I paused and turned to face him fully, my expression one of pity. Marcus, do you even know how I spent the last 3 years? The real last 3 years, not the fantasy you lived in. He was stunned into silence. I got up every morning at 5 a.m. to make your breakfast exactly how you liked it, I began, my voice soft but relentless. I waited for you late into the night, the food getting cold on the table, never knowing if you were working late or elsewhere. I washed your uniforms by hand so the starch would be just right. I mended your socks 1 pair at a time. I poured every second of my time, every ounce of my energy into you. And do you know why? Marcus couldn't answer. He just stared at me, his eyes wide. So that maybe, just maybe, you'd look at me, I whispered, the truth of it finally laid bare. So that you'd see me and not just the wife who was there. So that you'd be a little kinder, a little more present. But you, I continued, my voice steadying, growing stronger. You took everything I gave and you treated it like it was nothing. You took my love as if it were your right, as if it were worthless. And now the moment your first love reappears, your heart is already wandering. You didn't even have to think about it. Lena, he tried to interrupt, but I held up a hand. I'm tired, Marcus, I said, and the exhaustion was real. It was the exhaustion of 2 lifetimes. For 3 years I gave you all the love I had. Now there's nothing left inside me. I'm empty. There's no room in my heart for anyone anymore, least of all you. Those words pierced him deeper than any blade. For the first time, Marcus realized what he was losing wasn't just a wife. It was a woman who had once truly, completely, and selflessly loved him. And he had extinguished that love through sheer neglect. Lena, I know I was wrong before, but I can change, he said, his voice raw with a desperation I'd never heard before. Give me a chance. Let me love you again. Let me prove it. There's no need, I said, my finality absolute. I closed the suitcase and lifted it off the bed. Marcus, whatever we had ends here. No. He blocked the doorway, a last futile gesture. I won't let you leave. Then keep blocking the door, I said, putting down my luggage and sitting on the edge of the stripped bed. I've already filed the paperwork. Whether it's today or next week, I will leave. Your permission is not required. Marcus completely panicked. He never imagined I would be so resolute. The old Lena cried, begged, acted sweet whenever there was trouble, always giving him a way out, always folding under pressure. But this Lena was like a different person, frighteningly calm, terrifyingly firm, and utterly immovable. Lena, tell me, he pleaded, sinking to his knees before me, a gesture that would have shattered me in my previous life. What can I do? What can I possibly do for you to forgive me? I looked down at him, at this proud man brought to his knees, and my eyes were cold and unwavering. Marcus, there are some mistakes you just can't fix. Some wounds don't heal. Your feelings for Clara. That was one of those mistakes. You can't unring that bell. I can forget her, he said quickly, grasping at straws. I can forget everything about her. Forget her. I let out a soft, bitter laugh. Can you really? I stared at him, seeing right through to his soul. When you looked at her, Marcus, your eyes lit up. They came alive. That light. I've never once seen it when you looked at me. Not once in 3 years. He was speechless, utterly destroyed by the simple, devastating truth of it. Do you know what I hate most? I asked quietly, standing up. It's not that you loved someone else. It's that in all the years we were together, you never once looked at me like I was the one who lit up your world. You looked at me with duty, with habit, sometimes with affection, but never with that fire. But when you looked at her, you finally seemed alive. That's what I can't forgive. That broke him completely. Because he knew it was true. Every word was true. The next day I moved out. I rented a small room in a boarding house near the edge of town and began living alone. Marcus came to find me almost every day. His reactions cycled through stages of grief I had no interest in witnessing. Sometimes he begged, his voice choked with tears outside my door. Sometimes he got angry, shouting about vows and commitment. Sometimes he tried to threaten me, talking about how I'd regret being alone, how no one would want a divorced woman. But none of it moved me. His words were like stones thrown against a fortress wall. They just rattled off and fell to the ground. "Lena, are you really going to be this heartless?" he asked one evening, his voice muffled by the closed door. I didn't open it. "I'm not being heartless," I said from inside, my voice calm as I continued to mend a dress. "I'm protecting the pieces of my heart that are left." 3 years of marriage, he pleaded. "Doesn't that mean anything to you?" "It does," I said after a pause, my needles stilling. "It means I gave 3 years of my life to a dream that wasn't real. I'm choosing not to give it anymore. The only thing I feel for you now is disappointment." I heard him lean against the door, a soft thud followed by a ragged breath. He had never imagined losing me could hurt this much. He used to think of me as something like air. Always there, always taken for granted, never missed until it was gone. He thought even if he lost me it wouldn't matter. Now he knew. Without air a person suffocates. "Lena," he choked out, his voice barely a whisper. "I really know I was wrong. Please, just give me one more chance. One more." There was silence behind the door. Then after a long pause my voice came through, clear and final. "Marcus, there are some mistakes that should never be made. Some wounds should never be inflicted. You made them. You inflicted them. I'm just choosing to no longer stand in the path of the damage. Do you understand that?" But Marcus didn't understand. He didn't understand how I could become so distant, how I could stop loving him just like that, why I was so determined to walk away. But there was one thing he did understand clearly. He couldn't lose me. Losing me meant his entire world would fall apart. 2 weeks later, the divorce was officially approved. Both Commissar Briggs and Commander Vance were furious with Marcus, but their sympathy for me was greater. A model military wife, abandoned by her husband for a childhood flirtation. It caused an uproar not just in our compound but in the entire military district. Everyone condemned Marcus's heartlessness and praised my strength and courage. Lena was such a good comrade. Marcus must have been blind. I heard that Clara Monroe is very pretty. Men just love chasing something new and shiny. Poor Lena, so young and already having to live on her own. But she's strong. She'll manage. These conversations eventually reached Marcus's ears. Every word cut into him like a knife. He thought about going to Clara to ask her if this was really the future she wanted, if she felt the same pull he did. But he never did. Because suddenly he understood something. Even if he did go to her, even if they really ended up together, he wouldn't be happy. Because what he had lost was a woman who had truly loved him. And a woman like that you only meet once in a lifetime. The day the divorce was finalized, I stood outside the Civil Affairs Bureau, the small certificate in my hands feeling like it weighed 1,000 pounds. It was freedom. It was my life, given back to me. In my past life I could have never imagined a moment like this. Back then I treated Marcus like he was my world, my sky, my earth. I thought I couldn't survive without him. But now I had discovered that once I left him, the sky above me was even brighter, the air was sweeter. "Lena." His voice came from behind me. I turned around and saw him walking toward me quickly, his face drawn. "What is it?" I asked calmly, tucking the certificate into my purse. "I want to ask you something," he said, his eyes filled with a pain that no longer touched me. "Do you really not regret it?" "Regret what?" "Regret divorcing me? Regret leaving me? Throwing away everything we built?" I looked at him for a long moment, at the man who had caused me so much pain in 2 lifetimes, and then I suddenly smiled. It was a genuine smile, one of relief and liberation. "Marcus," I said, my voice light, "the only thing I regret is not leaving you sooner." It was like thunder cracking through a clear sky. Those words shattered whatever hope he had left. "That's not possible," he murmured, shaking his head in denial. "You can't not love me. You can't regret us. You're too full of yourself, Marcus," I said lightly, adjusting my bag strap. "No one in this world is truly indispensable. I used to think I couldn't live without you, but that was only because I'd never tried. Oh, I know. I'm doing just fine without you. With that, I turned and walked away, leaving Marcus standing alone on the government building steps. The sun was setting behind him, casting the world in orange and gold. His shadow stretched long and thin behind him, just like the loneliness that now filled his life, endless and all-consuming. After the divorce, I didn't fall apart like everyone might have expected. On the contrary, I became even more driven and full of life. I found a job as an assistant at the town's elementary school. The work was simple but fulfilling. In my free time, I started teaching myself English from old textbooks and began preparing for the reinstated National College entrance exam. When the government announced in 1977 that the Gaokao would resume after a decade of being suspended, the entire country was buzzing with excitement, and I was no exception. In my past life, I had given up this once-in-a-lifetime opportunity for Marcus. But in this life, I was going to take charge of my own future. "Lena, are you really planning to take the college entrance exam?" asked Anna, the young woman who lived in the room next to mine in the boarding house. She was wide-eyed with a mixture of awe and concern. "Of course," I nodded, looking up from my physics book. "But you're already 23, she hesitated, twisting her hands. "And you're, divorced." I supplied calmly. "So what? Being divorced means I can't go to college." "No, that's not what I meant," she said quickly, flushing. Even if you pass, it'll be hard to find someone to marry later. People talk." I smiled, a real easy smile that surprised even me. "Who said I'm looking to get married, Anna? I'm perfectly fine on my own." Anna was stunned into silence. In this era, it was rare for a woman to openly consider remaining unmarried, especially someone like me, still young and attractive. People just assumed I would eventually remarry. But I was making my position clear. I had no intention of getting married again. My future was mine alone to build. Preparing for the college entrance exam was grueling. I worked at the school during the day and studied at my small desk late into the night, often reading by lamplight until the early hours of the morning. My eyes grew tired and my back ached from hunching over books. And yet, I felt a fulfillment and happiness I had never known. That feeling of striving toward a goal, of fighting for something that belonged solely to me, was intoxicating. Back then, all of my energy had been devoted to taking care of Marcus. I had never once fought for my own dreams. Only now did I realize how beautiful it was to live for myself. When I went to register for the exam, something unexpected happened. "Comrade, are you sure you want to apply to Peking University?" the registration clerk asked, double-checking my form with a skeptical look. She was a middle-aged woman with thick glasses. "Yes," I nodded firmly. "But your qualifications?" The staff member looked a little troubled. "Peking University is the top university in the country. The competition is incredibly fierce. Most applicants are recent top graduates from the best schools. Perhaps you should consider a local teachers' college? It would be more realistic." I understood her concern. I was a 23-year-old divorced woman with no recent formal education. On paper, my chances were nil. "I know it's competitive," I said, my voice steady and confident. "But I believe in myself. This is the school I want." The clerk sighed, stamped my form with a resigned shrug and handed it back. "Good luck, comrade. You'll need it." When word spread through the town and back to the military compound, it sparked a fresh wave of gossip. "Lena's applying to Peking University? Seriously? That's the best school in the entire country. She's just a school assistant. Can she really make it? Even if she doesn't get in, you've got to admire her courage. She's got spirit, that one." When Marcus heard the news, he was sitting in his now quiet office, staring blankly into space. For the past 6 months he had been a mess. He made frequent mistakes at work and was listless in his personal life. He had tried half-heartedly to reconnect with Clara, hoping to recapture that familiar feeling, to validate the choice that had cost him so much. But when he finally saw her again, the excitement he had imagined was nowhere to be found. Instead, he felt a hollow emptiness he couldn't explain. Clara was still beautiful, still sweet. But she was also ordinary. The magic he'd assigned to her was a phantom of his own making. That was when he finally understood what he had felt for Clara wasn't love. It was nostalgia, a longing for a simpler, idealized past. But what he had lost in me was something entirely different. I had truly, honestly loved him. "Captain, what are you thinking about?" asked his aide, Private Davies. "Nothing." Marcus shook himself from his thoughts. "What did you just say?" "I said Lena's taking the college entrance exam," Davies repeated. She's applying to Peking University. Beta. Marcus froze. The Lena he had known was a gentle, traditional housewife. She had never shown any particular interest in academics beyond what was required to run a household. And now she was aiming for the best university in the country? It was unimaginable. That's right, Davies continued, either oblivious to his captain's shock or choosing to ignore it. I heard from Mrs. Gable that she studies late into the night. Everyone says she's really determined. Got stacks of books in her room. Marcus said nothing. A heavy, suffocating silence fell over him. Only now did he begin to realize he had never truly understood the woman he married. She hadn't lacked ambition or intelligence. She had simply buried it all for him. She had sacrificed her potential on the altar of being his wife. And now, without him weighing her down, she was finally living as her true self. That realization filled him with a deep, aching guilt that was far worse than any anger I could have shown him. He hadn't just ruined a marriage. He had, however unintentionally, held back a bright and capable woman. He had destroyed my youth and my dreams. As the exam date drew closer, I entered the final phase of my study sprint. My daily routine became strict and disciplined. I woke up at 5 a.m. for morning reading, worked at the school until 3 o'clock, then returned home and studied until midnight. Everyone around me watched my perseverance with a mixture of admiration and pity. Lena really is something else, my landlady, Mrs. Finch, said to a neighbor within my earshot. Works all day, studies all night, manages everything on her own. No family, no husband to support her. Yeah, Marcus Thorne was a fool, the neighbor replied, shaking her head. A first-class fool. How could he let a woman like that go? Look at her spirit. These whispers eventually reached Marcus, and each word made his guilt deepen. He started hanging around near the boarding house where I lived, just hoping to catch a glimpse of me. But every time he saw me, he didn't have the courage to approach. He didn't know what he could say. Sorry felt like the most inadequate word in the world. So all he could do was watch from afar. Watch me leaving early in the morning with a stack of books. Watch me returning late under the glow of the street lamps, looking tired but purposeful. Then one night he finally couldn't hold back. Lena. He called out to me at the gate of the boarding house just as I was returning from the library. I stopped and turned around, my face illuminated by the lone street lamp. I looked tired, but my eyes were clear and focused. What are you doing here, Marcus? I wanted to see you, he said, his voice trembling slightly in the cool night air. He looked thinner, I noticed, less sure of himself. Is there something you need? I asked calmly, my tone polite but devoid of any warmth. The tone you'd use with a distant acquaintance. No, nothing in particular, he mumbled, shoving his hands in his pockets. I just wanted to see how you were doing. With the exam coming up and all. I looked at him, at this man who was now a stranger to me. There wasn't a single ripple in my heart. Well, you've seen me. I'm fine. Very busy but fine. If there's nothing else, I'll be on my way. I have to study. Wait, he called out quickly as I turned to go. Lena, are you really applying to Peking University? Yes. Why choose somewhere so far away? His voice carried a pain he couldn't hide. Can't you stay here? Go to a local college? The provincial university is good. I looked at him, and in that moment I understood his fear. Marcus, do you think I would change my plans because of you? Do you think I chose Beda to run away from you? His face flushed. He didn't deny it. That was exactly what he thought. My ambition was just a reaction to him. Well, let me tell you, I said, my voice cool and steady, cutting through the night. You're wrong. I chose Peking University because it's the best university in the country. You never even entered into my consideration. This decision is about me and my future. It has nothing to do with you. That sentence hit him like a knife to the chest. I saw him physically wince. Lena, he said, his voice barely a whisper. Do you really not care about me at all anymore? I looked at him, quiet for a long time, the silence stretching between us. Finally I answered. Marcus, do you know what it means for a heart to go completely cold? He shook his head, his eyes wide and lost. It means when someone truly gives up. Nothing you do can make them feel anything ever again. No pain, no anger, no joy, no love. Nothing. That's how I feel about you. I don't hate you. I don't love you. You're just a stranger to me now. A stranger I used to know. No, he whispered, the word a plea. That can't be. You can't possibly feel nothing at all for me. After everything. Why not? I asked, genuinely curious about his arrogance. Marcus, you think too highly of yourself. Do you really believe the whole world should revolve around you? That my life choices should be based on how you feel? He was speechless. This is the last time I'm going to say this, I said, my voice clear and final. There is nothing between us anymore. My life, my choices, they have nothing to do with you. So please stop showing up here. You're disturbing my peace. And with that, I turned and walked into the boarding house, closing the gate firmly behind me. I didn't look back. The night wind was cold and I heard him shiver on the other side of the gate. But colder than the wind was the emptiness I knew now filled his heart. He finally understood. He was truly and permanently alone. On the day of the college entrance exam, the entire city was buzzing with a nervous, excited energy. Countless young people streamed into the testing centers, their faces set with determination, ready to change their fate. I was one of them. I wore a simple blue mouse suit, my hair neatly tied back in a practical braid. A confident calm settled over me. Most of the examinees were teenagers, 16 to 18 years old. At 23, I stood out as one of the oldest candidates, but I didn't care about the stares or the whispers. I only cared about the goal, to get into Peking University. The first subject was Chinese. When the test papers were handed out, I quickly skimmed through the questions. My heart lifted. They didn't seem too difficult. Even though I hadn't had the chance to go to college in my past life, I'd always loved reading. My foundation in literature was solid. I wrote calmly, my handwriting neat and precise, my thoughts clear and organized. The second subject was math, the one I had worried about the most. My foundation was shaky, so I had devoted most of my study time to it. To my surprise and immense relief, most of the questions were ones I could actually solve. All the hours of frantic studying, the pages of solved equations, the sleepless nights, they hadn't been for nothing. Next came English, then political science, and finally history. I did well on each one. I felt sharper and more focused than I ever had in my life. My mind was clear, my memory precise. It was as if the fog of my first life had completely lifted, leaving my intellect shining and bright. Outside the exam building, crowds of anxious parents waited. When I finally stepped out after the last test, feeling both exhausted and exhilarated, I spotted a familiar figure standing at the edge of the crowd. Marcus was there, his eyes searching until they locked on me. There was a hopeful, almost pleading look in them. Our eyes met across the sea of people. He started to take a step forward to push his way toward me. I turned away before he could approach. I didn't have time for him. I didn't have space for him in my new world. The only thing on my mind now was the result. Waiting for the scores. Waiting for the acceptance letter. My future was a blank page and I was finally holding the pen. A few months later, the results were released. I had been accepted into the Chinese literature department at Peking University. My scores weren't just passing. They were outstanding, placing me in the top percentile of applicants from our entire province. The news spread through the town and back to the military compound faster than the speed of sound. Caused a sensation. A divorced woman, living on her own, getting into the most prestigious university in the country? It was nothing short of a miracle. It challenged every conventional belief people held. Amazing. Truly amazing. Who says women are inferior to men? Lena is the perfect counterexample. She's what you call a real strong woman. Marcus Thorne must be drowning in regret now. Praise, congratulations, and admiration came pouring in from every direction. I became a local celebrity, an inspiration to countless young women and a topic of fascinated discussion for everyone else. When Marcus heard the news, he was sitting in his quiet apartment, a hollow shell of the confident man he'd once been. He was stunned. He had never, in his wildest dreams, imagined I would actually get into Peking University. In his mind, I had always just been Lena, his wife, sweet, gentle, good with household things, but with no special talent or ambition beyond that. A comfortable presence, an accessory to his life. Only now did he realize how catastrophically wrong he had been. I hadn't lacked talent or ambition. I had simply buried it all for years while taking care of him, while pouring all my energy into supporting his dreams. Now that I was free from the burden of our marriage, I could finally shine with my own light. And it was a light so bright it blinded him with regret. That realization shook him to his core and filled him with a guilt so profound it was a physical ache. He hadn't just lost a loyal wife. He had lost a woman of remarkable ability and spirit. And once a woman like that walks out of your life, she's gone forever. You don't get a second chance. The day I received my official acceptance letter in the mail, I invited a few friends over to my small room to celebrate. Mrs. Finch, my kind landlady, Anna, my young neighbor from down the hall, and Lily, a fellow teacher from the school. We drank cheap tea and shared a small packet of sunflower seeds, but the joy in the room was palpable. "Lena, you're the pride of all of us women," Anna said excitedly, her eyes shining. "You've shown everyone what we can do." "Exactly," Lily added enthusiastically. "Who cares if you're divorced? You just got into beta. You've made a name for yourself all on your own." Mrs. Finch took my hand, her eyes moist with emotion. "Child, you've had a tough year, but now the worst is behind you. You've earned this. You've earned every bit of it." Looking at the people around me, people who genuinely cared for me and supported me without reservation, my heart swelled with a warmth I had never known in my marriage. This was what real friendship and true support looked like. Compared to Marcus's shallow, conditional affections, these sincere connections meant so much more. "Thank you, everyone," I said, raising my chipped teacup. "Here's to new beginnings." "To new beginnings," they all echoed, clinking their cups against mine in a celebration of my fresh start. Just then there was a hesitant knock on the door. Anna, being closest, went to open it. She returned a moment later with an odd, uncomfortable look on her face. "Lena," she said quietly. It's Marcus." The lively chatter in the room died instantly. Everyone knew about my past with Marcus, and they all wholeheartedly supported my decision to leave him. His sudden, uninvited appearance was a dark cloud over the celebration. I took a deep breath. I wouldn't let him ruin this. "Let him in," I said calmly. Marcus stepped inside, his broad shoulders seeming to fill the small doorway. His eyes swept over the simple room, the small spread of tea and seeds, the happy faces of my friends, and finally settled on me. A bitter, complicated smile tugged at his lips. "Congratulations," he said, his voice rough. "Getting into beta. That's really something." "Thank you," I replied flatly, not offering him a seat. The room was tense with silence. I was wondering if I could speak with you alone for a moment," he pleaded softly, his eyes darting toward my friends. I glanced at Mrs. Finch, Anna, and Lily. Their expressions were protective. I gave a small, reassuring nod. "It's all right. I'll be right back." We stepped out onto the small, narrow balcony overlooking the street. The sun was beginning to set, casting the distant mountains in shades of purple and orange. "Lena, I wanted to say, I'm sorry," he blurted out, the words seeming to cost him a great effort. "You've already said it," I replied calmly, looking out at the view rather than at him. "I know. But I wanted to say it again. Now that I finally understand just how incredible a woman I lost." His voice was thick with emotion. "Too late," I said flatly, the two words hanging in the air between us. "Yeah," he gave a bitter, self-deprecating smile. "Too late." He hesitated, shuffling his feet. "Lena, you're going to have a bright future." "I know it. I hope so." He hesitated again, then added, "About Clara?" I finally turned to look at him, one eyebrow raised. "What about her?" I didn't go to see her. Not after everything. We've been apart for a while, and in that time I've come to realize a lot." He took a deep breath. What I felt for her, maybe it was just an illusion. A dream I was too stubborn to let go of. I didn't respond. I felt nothing hearing those words. No satisfaction, no vindication. Just nothing. "What I really want to say is," he continued, gathering courage, "now I know what true love is. Or what it should have been. It should have been you, Lena. It was always you, I was just too blind to see it. Emily, could we ever?" I cut him off before he could finish the painful sentence. "Marcus, whatever it is you're about to ask, the answer is no. It will always be no." His face went pale in an instant. "Why?" he asked, a desperate plea in his eyes. "If I didn't go to Clara, if I've realized my mistake, if I've changed." "It doesn't matter," I said, turning to face him fully, my arms crossed over my chest. "Don't you understand, Marcus? The problem was never whether you saw Clara or not. The problem is that she had a place in your heart. A place that should have been mine alone. You offered it to her willingly. You can't just take it back now and offer it to me again like I'm some consolation prize. The offering is tainted." "But now doesn't change anything?" he whispered, horrified. "My feelings haven't changed," I said, my voice firm. "Some damage can't be undone. Some mistakes can't be forgiven. What you felt for Claire was that kind of mistake. It broke something between us that can't be fixed. Marcus closed his eyes in pain as if I'd struck him. Understanding isn't enough, I said quietly. Understanding doesn't mean we can start over. The past doesn't just disappear. Is there really no chance for us? He asked, searching my face for any sign of softening. I met his gaze, unflinching, my eyes steady and sure. No, Marcus. There's nothing left between us. There's no us. There's just you and there's just me. And my future is waiting for me. With that, I turned and walked back inside, leaving him alone on the balcony. The night had fallen completely now, and the lights of the town twinkled below. He stood there, motionless for a long time, as if trying to hold on to something that had already slipped through his fingers long ago. And I knew he finally, truly understood. He had lost me for good. When the day came for me to leave for Beijing, I packed my 2 small suitcases. The entire boarding house came out to see me off at the train station. People from the school had come too, and even a few faces from the military compound who had secretly admired my courage. I had become a source of pride, an example of independent womanhood. Lena, write to us when you get to Beijing. Mrs. Finch called out, dabbing her eyes with a handkerchief. Study hard. We're all waiting for your good news. When you become a great scholar, don't forget to come back and visit us. Their sincere, heartfelt blessings filled me with a warmth that chased away the autumn chill. I waved goodbye to them all, a genuine smile on my face, and stepped up into the carriage. The train whistle blew, a long, mournful sound that was also full of promise. The train slowly pulled away from the platform, the familiar scenery of my hometown beginning to blur as it picked up speed. I sat by the window watching it all fade into the distance, a mix of emotions swirling inside me. Nostalgia, excitement, anticipation, and a profound sense of peace. I thought of everything I had been through, of the version of myself who once gave up everything for a man. That woman was gone. She had died on that cliffside. Now I was a new Lena, a woman living for herself, defined by her own mind and her own choices. The train picked up speed, carrying me toward a new life, a new city, a new future. I was heading towards Peking University. I was heading towards me. Back on the platform, hidden at the rear of the crowd, Marcus stood silently. He watched the train until it disappeared into a small dot on the horizon, the sound of its engine fading into the distance. And deep down he knew this was the final goodbye. From now on, Lena Thorne and Marcus Thorne truly belonged to different worlds. Hers was expanding, bright with possibility. His had shrunk to the size of his regret. He turned and walked away alone into the rest of his life. The end.